The sterile silence of the Swift Group's executive suite shattered like glass. Chase Swift, a man whose composure was as legendary as his business empire, gripped the phone so tightly his knuckles turned white. His younger brother, Noah, watched from across the expansive mahogany desk, his own easygoing demeanor vanishing as he saw the blood drain from Chase's face. "What did you say?" Chase's voice was a low, dangerous whisper. On the other end of the line, his head of security spoke with grim urgency. "Sir, we found her. Or rather, we found a child. A girl named Starry. She's 5 years old. The DNA test confirms that she is Nina's daughter." The name hung in the air, a ghost that had haunted the Swift family for 5 long years. Nina, their beloved sister, had vanished from a hospital after giving birth. The family had been told the baby was stillborn, suffocated. The twin tragedies, a lost child and a missing sister, had carved a permanent wound into their lives. "Where is she?" Chase demanded, his mind already racing. A pause. "That's the difficult part, sir. She's been with a family named York. Neglectful is too mild a word. We were alerted by an anonymous hospital tip. The child was admitted with a severe head injury and the security chief hesitated. The doctors found old and new wounds. Whiplashes, sir. Malnutrition. It's bad. A cold." Primal rage settled deep in Chase's chest. A forgotten niece. His sister's child. Alive and suffering unspeakable horrors while he lived in ignorant luxury. He closed his eyes. The image of his laughing sister replaced by the phantom of a small, broken body. "Get the best medical team in the country on a private jet. I want them in Northern Town yesterday," he commanded, his voice like chipped ice. "Spare no expense. Find my sister's daughter. And find out everything about this York family. I want to know every breath they've taken for the last 5 years." He hung up, the click echoing the finality of a death sentence. "Noah," he said, his gaze fixed on the sprawling city below. "Get the family. We're going to Northern Town. We're bringing our girl home." Dust and the stench of decay clung to the dilapidated York estate. It was a place where hope went to die, and Starry knew its every crumbling corner. Her small, underfed body, clad in rags, ached with the feverish heat from the gash on her forehead, hastily stitched and poorly bandaged. But physical pain was a familiar companion. The agony in her heart was far worse. They had taken it. The one thing she had left of her mother. A smooth, green jade pendant carved into a delicate leaf. Ignoring the throbbing in her head, she squeezed her tiny frame through the dog hole in the back fence, the entrance she was usually forced to use. She crawled across the weed-choked yard, her eyes fixed on the house. Inside, old Mrs. York, the family's cruel matriarch, was admiring the pendant, holding it up to the grimy window light. Starry pushed open the back door and stood in the doorway, a defiant, miniature silhouette. "Give it back," she said, her voice small but surprisingly steady. "It's my mother's, Mrs." York spun around, her face twisting into a sneer. "Your mother? That worthless woman. She gave this to me as a gift, you little rat. A payment for taking in her bastard child." She clutched the jade to her chest. "It's mine now." "You're lying." Starry's voice rose, trembling with a fury that belied her size. "You hurt my mommy. You pushed her down the stairs and you took it from her." The fragmented memories were blurry, nightmarish, but the truth of them burned inside her. "Insolent whelp, Mrs." York lunged forward, her hand raised to strike. But before her hand could connect, the squeal of tires cut through the air. A fleet of sleek, black sedans, impossibly clean and menacing, pulled up to the ramshackle house. The doors opened in unison, and a group of men in sharp suits emerged. At their lead were 2 men who commanded attention without a word. One was Chase, his presence a cloak of cold authority. The other was Noah, his face a mask of controlled fury. The York family stumbled out onto the porch, bewildered, seeing Chase's simple, dark attire. Mr. York scoffed. "Who are you? Some low-level construction boss trying to collect a debt? Get off my property." Chase didn't even glance at him. His eyes, dark and intense, found the small, bruised girl standing defiantly in the doorway. He saw the fire in her gaze, the ghost of his sister's spirit, and something inside him both broke and solidified into diamond-hard resolve. He took in her stick-thin limbs, the poorly cleaned wound on her head, the whip-like scars peeking from beneath her tattered sleeves. "Nurse, step forward. We are here for the child. You will apologize for what you have done to her." Mrs. York let out a cackle. "Apologize to that little stray? You must be joking." Chase finally moved. He walked slowly toward them, his steps measured and silent. "My name is Chase Swift," he said, his voice quiet but carrying an absolute, chilling weight. "Chairman of the Swift Group." The name landed like a bomb. The Yorks' faces went slack with disbelief, then contorted in dawning horror. The Swift Group wasn't just a company. It was the untouchable behemoth that ran this entire region. They weren't provoking a construction worker. They had abused the long-lost niece of the most powerful man in the country. As if on cue, a low, guttural rumble started in the distance, growing rapidly into a deafening roar. Over the hill, the massive yellow arms of a dozen excavators rose against the sky, their steel jaws glinting. "Your entire estate," Chase stated, his voice devoid of all emotion, "will be leveled in 10 minutes. Panic erupted. The rumbling grew louder as the machines advanced, their treads churning the earth. The very ground began to tremble. "No, please." Mr. York fell to his knees, his face ashen. It was a mistake, a misunderstanding. The entire York family dropped to the ground, sobbing and pleading, their earlier arrogance dissolving into pathetic groveling. "Mercy, we'll do anything." Mrs. York cried, crawling forward. Chase's gaze was unyielding. He gestured toward the small girl who watched the scene with wide, solemn eyes. "You will not beg from me," he said coldly. "You will kneel before Starry. You will look her in the eye and apologize for every blow, every curse, every moment of starvation you inflicted upon her." Scrambling, the Yorks turned to Starry, their pleas becoming a desperate, humiliating chorus. "We're sorry, Starry. Please, forgive us. We were wrong. Tell him to stop." Starry looked down at the cowering figures who had been her tormentors for as long as she could remember. She saw no remorse in their eyes, only fear. Her small chin lifted. With the maturity that stunned the men around her, she spoke, her voice clear and ringing in the chaotic air. "No." The single word silenced them. "I will never forgive you," she said, her eyes burning with a righteous clarity. "Not for what you did to me, and not for what you did to my mother." Chase's lips curved into the faintest, proudest of smiles. He motioned to one of his men, who strode forward, plucked the jade pendant from Mrs. York's limp hand and placed it gently into Starry's. Chase crouched down, his gaze softening as he met his niece's. "Let's go home," he said softly. He scooped her fragile body into his arms. As they walked away, the first excavator bucket slammed into the front wall of the York house, and the structure splintered with a sickening crunch. The Swift family didn't look back, leaving the now homeless Yorks kneeling in the dust, their world collapsing around them. The Swift mansion was less a home and more a palace carved from glass and ambition. Sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, glinting off marble floors and abstract sculptures that cost more than the house Starry had just left. It was breathtaking and suffocating all at once. An elegantly dressed older woman, her silver hair styled in a graceful chignon, rushed forward, her hands outstretched. "My dear child," Madam Swift murmured, her eyes, the same warm hazel as Chase's, instantly misting over. She gently cups Starry's face. You have your mother's eyes. Exactly Nina's. The genuine warmth in her touch was a balm on Starry's frayed nerves. A fleeting promise of belonging. The promise shattered the moment a woman descended the grand staircase. Grace Swift, Chase's wife, moved with the rigid grace of a porcelain doll. Her beauty is sharp and cold as the diamonds at her throat. Her gaze swept over Starry, dismissing her worn clothes and nervous posture with a single, contemptuous glance. So, this is the jinx. Grace's voice was like ice cracking. She stopped at the foot of the stairs, refusing to come closer. The one who brought ruin to the Orcs. She snapped her fingers, and a maid scurried forward, placing a small, ornate brass brazier filled with smouldering charcoal on the marble floor. Before you take one more step into my home, you will step over that. We'll burn the misfortune off you. The acrid smoke stung Starry's eyes. Humiliation, hot and familiar, flooded her cheeks. She was a contamination, a stain to be cleansed. Grace, stop it. Chase's voice was a low growl. He moved to stand between his wife and his niece, a solid wall of protection. That's enough. She's a child who has been through hell. She will not be subjected to this medieval nonsense in her own home. Grace laughed, a brittle, ugly sound. Her home. This child is a harbinger of disaster. The Yorks took her in, and their company is now bankrupt. Their family is shattered. Do you think we are immune? Mark my words, Chase, she will bring the same rot to this family. Starry's hands twisted the hem of her worn shirt. The instinct to earn her keep, to prove she wasn't a burden, was deeply ingrained. I can work, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I can clean the floors, I can cook, I won't be any trouble. She took a tentative step toward Grace, her hand outstretched in a gesture of peace. Grace recoiled as if Starry were brandishing a snake. Don't you dare touch me. Your bad luck is practically radiating off you. She turned her fury back to her husband, her voice rising to a shrill ultimatum. This is the last time I will say it, Chase. Either she goes or I do. I will not live under the same roof as this curse. I will pack my bags and return to my parents' home tonight. The words hung in the air, a declaration of war in the pristine living room. Starry felt the fragile hope of family crumbling around her. She was the crack in the foundation. Tears welled in her eyes, blurring the hostile faces into watercolor smudges. It's okay, she said, her voice trembling. I'll leave. I don't want to cause any trouble for anyone. You are not going anywhere, Starry, Chase stated, his voice ringing with absolute finality. He didn't even look at his wife as he spoke. This is your home now. As for you, Grace, he finally turned, his expression a mask of cold disappointment. The door is open. You are free to do as you please. Grace stared, her jaw slack with disbelief. He had chosen the girl. He had chosen this stray, this jinx, over her. The shock quickly curdled into a deeper, more agonizing pain. Of course, she said, her voice breaking with a raw, visceral hurt that silenced the room. Of course you bring home a child. Any child, because I couldn't give you one. Could I? This is my punishment, isn't it? To have you bring this burden into our home to remind me every single day of my failure. Chase's face softened, the anger replaced by a profound sadness. Grace, you know that's not true. I love you, he said, his voice heavy with the weight of years of this same, painful argument. But I don't know this person you've become. This cruelty, this jealousy toward an innocent girl, I don't understand it. He looked at her, truly heartbroken, before turning to gently guide Starry away from the battlefield of his marriage. Later, in a room painted the color of a soft dawn, Starry sat on the edge of a bed larger than any she had ever slept in. As tears streamed silently down her face, a faint, pearlescent shimmer filled the air beside her, comforting presence she knew as the spirit of her mother. I'm sorry, Mama, she whispered to the light, I didn't mean to make them fight. Aunt Grace, she looks so sad. Her sadness has deep roots. A calm, resonant voice spoke from the shadows. Starry turned to see an elderly man with a kind face and knowing eyes. A mystical master who had guided her through visions before. Grace was not always this way. Years ago, Chase was in a terrible accident. To save his life, she used a forbidden ritual, sacrificing her own body and her future as a mother to shield him from death. The revelation struck Starry with the force of a physical blow. Grace wasn't just cruel, she was a hero. Her bitterness was a scar from an act of profound love. The pain she inflicted on others was a reflection of the sacrifice she had made. A fierce, unwavering resolve settled in Starry's heart. She knew what she had to do. Ignoring the master's silent, cautionary gaze, she searched the room until she found a sewing kit. She took out a needle and a spool of bright scarlet thread. With a steady hand, she pricked the tip of her finger. A single, perfect drop of blood welled up. Crimson and alive, she touched the blood tool of the thread, whispering an ancient incantation. This was her lucky star ability, a power that drew from her own life force. As she began to meticulously weave the thread into a simple bracelet, she imbued it with every ounce of her will. The blood was a conduit, channeling her vitality, her very essence, into the cord. The master had warned her that using her power so directly, especially to alter a fate sealed by sacrifice, could permanently drain her. But Starry didn't hesitate. Looking at the vibrant red string bracelet coiled in her palm, she made a silent vow. She would help Grace. She would heal the wound that festered in her aunt's heart, and if she could, restore what she had lost. And she would protect her from any other danger that dared to come near, no matter the cost to herself. The air in the Swift mansion was as cold and polished as the marble beneath Starry's feet. Grace, her statue of resentful elegance in a silk dressing gown, glared at the small, handmade bracelet Starry offered her. Woven from simple twine and wild flowers, it was a child's peace offering. "What is this trash?" Grace's voice was a shard of ice. She snatched the bracelet, her manicured fingers crushing the delicate petals. "Do you think a weed bracelet can buy my affection? You are a stray, a reminder of everything I can't have." She flung the mangled gift to the floor. "Your uncles may be blind to it, but I see you for what you are. One more misstep, and I'll personally drive you to the orphanage and leave you on the curb." Starry flinched, her large eyes welling with tears she refused to let fall. Before she could find a reply, the serene silence of the afternoon was shattered. The grand doors burst open, and rough, masked men swarmed into the foyer. A scream caught in Grace's throat as a coarse hand clamped over her mouth. Another pair of arms seized Starry, lifting her off the floor like a doll. The world dissolved into a blur of violent motion and stifling darkness as they were dragged from the opulent prison of the mansion into a waiting van. They were thrown onto the floor of a desolate, decaying building. The air was thick with the stench of mildew and rot. One of the captors, a hulking man with a cruel smile, crouched before them. "So, the high and mighty Mrs. Swift," he sneered at Grace, who was bound and trembling. "And the little brat who ruined the York family." He pointed a grimy finger at Starry. "Jana and Philip York send their regards. The plan is simple. The girl gets a permanent swimming lesson in the sea. As for you," his eyes crawled over Grace, his intent sickeningly clear, "we'll make sure your husband gets a very broken toe back." Panic, cold and absolute, seized Grace. She fought against her ropes, her mind screaming. This was a nightmare, a direct consequence of the war her family had waged against the Yorks. A war this child was at the center of. When Grace next awoke, the dim light filtering through a boarded-up window revealed a horrifying sight. She was no longer bound, but a wave of nausea hit her as she saw Starry huddled beside her. The child's small hand was wrapped in a piece of torn fabric, stained dark with blood. On the floor lay the shards of a broken ceramic bowl. It was Starry who had cut the ropes from Grace's wrists, slicing her own hand in the process. Starry, who had been trying to protect her. My God! Your hand, Grace gasped, crawling closer. Her voice was raw with the terror that was no longer just for herself. Starry looked up, her expression shockingly serene amidst the filth and fear. It's okay, Aunt Grace. It doesn't hurt that much. She offered a small, reassuring smile that completely dismantled the wall of bitterness around Grace's heart. The child's calm was Grace's undoing. How could this little girl, who had every reason to hate her, show such quiet bravery? How could she bleed to save the very person who had wished her gone only hours before? A sob ripped through Grace, her raw, ugly sound of profound remorse. Starry, I am so sorry. She wept, the words tumbling out in a desperate, broken torrent. I was cruel. I was jealous. I saw you, and all I could see was my own failure, my own emptiness. I said such horrible things. Can you ever forgive me? She clutched at Starry. Not as an heiress or a CEO's wife, but as a woman utterly shattered, begging for absolution from a child. Starry's gaze was filled with an unnerving wisdom. She gently placed her ninjured hand on Grace's cheek, a touch of balm on a festering wound. I forgive you, Aunt Grace, she said softly. I know you were hurting. Just then, the heavy tread of footsteps echoed outside their room. The captors were coming back. Starry's eyes darted to a small, grimy opening near the floor, a broken vent shaft, barely large enough for one person. You have to go, Starry whispered urgently, her small body tensing with courage. Get through there. Find Uncle Chase. Grace's head snapped up, a fierce, primal protectiveness surging through her. No, I am not leaving you. Not now, not ever. The woman who had wanted Starry gone would now rather die than abandon her. They want me, not you, Starry insisted, her small hands pushing against Grace's shoulders with surprising strength. You're faster, please. You have to be the one to get help. She shoved Grace toward the opening as the door handle began to turn. With a final, desperate push, Grace squeezed through the tight space, scraping her arms and legs on the rusted metal. The last thing she saw was Starry standing alone, a small, defiant figure turning to face the hulking shadows that filled the doorway. Grace ran, fueled by adrenaline and a prayer. She hadn't gone 50 yards before the roar of engines filled the air. A convoy of black cars screeched to a halt, and Chase burst out, his face a mask of cold fury. His brothers right behind him. They stormed the building with brutal efficiency. When they emerged moments later, Chase was carrying a safe, albeit shaken, Starry. His brothers dragged the subdued captors behind them. A final car pulled up, and a pale, terrified Jana and Philip York were thrown out onto the gravel before them. It was them, Grace choked out, pointing a trembling finger. They hired them. Chase's gaze fell upon Philip, and the temperature seemed to drop by 20 degrees. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to break his legs. He commanded his head of security. Then make sure he and his sister have a long time in prison to regret crossing my family. The order was carried out with chilling speed. Their screams a final, satisfying note of justice in the night. Back in the pristine safety of the mansion, the chaos felt a world away. Chase sat on the edge of Starry's bed, his large, capable hands gently cleaning and bandaging her wound. Grace watched from the doorway, her heart aching with a mixture of guilt and a fierce and familiar love. This tiny, brave girl had not only saved her life, but had saved her soul. She had won Grace over, not with power or magic, but with the simple, unyielding purity of her heart. As Chase finished, he began to argue in a low, furious tone with his brothers about the security breach. Grace stepped forward to add her own recriminations. Stop. A small, clear voice cut through the tension. They all turned to look at Starry, propped up against her pillows. "Please," she said, her eyes sweeping over her uncles and her aunt. "Don't fight anymore. We're all safe now. We're a family." In the silence that followed, her words settled over them, a quiet promise of a new beginning, brokered by the very child they were all sworn to protect. The jade pendant felt cool and smooth against Starry's small palm, a single point of calm in her turbulent world. Seated on her bed in the opulent Swift mansion, a room larger than any she had ever known, she clutched the stone and closed her eyes. A soft, ethereal light pulsed from within the jade, casting a gentle green glow across her face. "Master," she whispered, her voice barely audible, "I have the pendant. What must I do now to find my mother?" A serene, ancient voice echoed not in the room, but directly in her mind, a resonance that was both comforting and profound. "The pendant is only the first key, young one. To awaken its true power, the power to heal, the power to locate, you need its twin. A lucky bracelet, lost to this world at the same time you were." Starry's heart hammered against her ribs. "Another item. Where is it?" It fell into the hands of a human family. "It is now worn as a simple trinket by a boy named Owen York, the nephew of the woman who tormented you. He attends the local elementary school." The voice explained that when the jade and the bracelet were united, they could synthesize an all-purpose miraculous medicine, a panacea potent enough to cure her mother's mysterious illness. School. The word was a foreign concept, a place of stories and pictures she'd only glimpsed from a distance. Tear, a cold and familiar companion from her time with the Yorks, called it in her stomach. But the image of her mother's fading smile was stronger. Resolve hardened her delicate features. She would go. She would face anything to save her. The next day, Starry stood before her new first-grade class, a small, solitary figure in a crisp new uniform. The classroom buzzed with the chaotic energy of children, a wall of noise and curious stares. "My name is Starry Swift," she said, her voice clear and polite, just as her Uncle Chase had coached her. "It's very nice to meet all of you." A snort of derision cut through the air. "Swift, more like a country bumpkin," a boy with a sneer jeered from the front row. He wore a flashy silver bracelet that glinted under the fluorescent lights. "Owen York." He didn't even try to hide his contempt. "Look at her. I bet she's never even seen a real city before." A teacher, a harried-looking woman named Miss Davis, gestured vaguely. "Starry, you can take the empty seat next to Owen." "No way." Owen shoved his chair away, creating a wider gap. "I'm not sitting next to some charity case. She probably smells like dirt." Laughter rippled through the other children, who quickly took their cue from him. Starry's hands clenched into fists. "That's not a nice thing to say. What are you going to do about it, bumpkin?" he taunted, puffing out his chest. "Owen, that's enough," Miss Davis said, her tone lacking any real authority. Then, she rounded on the new student. "And Starry, we do not start arguments on the first day. Another word out of you, and I'll be calling your guardians." Before Starry could process the blatant injustice, the classroom door swung open with a dramatic flourish. A woman with a face tight with anger and resentment stood there, eyes immediately locking onto Starry. It was Jana, Owen's mother, her expression a mask of pure venom. "I knew it," Jana hissed, striding into the room as if she owned it. "I knew the Swifts would send their little troublemaker here, you." She snarled, pointing a perfectly manicured finger at Starry. "You're the reason my family is in ruins. You think you can just show up and live a life of luxury while we suffer?" Miss Davis looked utterly overwhelmed. "Mrs. York." Please, Jana ignored her, a focus solely on the small child. "I'm warning you. Stay away from my son. If you so much as breathe on him, I will make you regret the day you were born." The air in the room grew thick with tension. This was more than a schoolyard squabble. It was the public continuation of a bitter family feud. The conflict escalated with breathtaking speed, culminating in the gymnasium during the school's annual art competition. Chana, seeing an opportunity for public humiliation, had manipulated the situation, goading Starry into a one-on-one showdown against Owen. The prize, she declared with a malicious grin, would be Owen's tacky old bracelet. The gymnasium was packed with parents and teachers. In the front row sat Chase, his face an unreadable, stoic mask, but his protective presence was a tangible force field around Starry. Beside him, Grace sat stiffly, her expression a complicated mixture of annoyance and something else, something she couldn't quite name. She had come at Chase's insistence expecting to be bored, yet found herself watching the small girl on stage with an unsettling intensity. Owen worked with confident, showy strokes, creating a technically perfect, if uninspired, painting of a vase of flowers. The crowd murmured in appreciation. Starry, in contrast, was a whirlwind of motion, her brush flying across the canvas, splashing vibrant, seemingly random colors. From the audience, it looked like a chaotic mess. Ridicule began to bubble up from the parents. "What is that supposed to be?" someone whispered loudly. Owen smirked, finishing his last petal with a flourish. The timer buzzed. "Time's up," the moderator announced. As Owen presented his clean, conventional painting to polite applause, Starry stood before her own canvas, which was met with confused silence and a few snickers. Her face was calm, her eyes scanning the crowd until they met Grace's. Grace, to her own profound surprise, felt a flicker of empathy, a tiny, unwanted spark of concern for this strange child who had upended her life. Almost involuntarily, she held up the bottle of mineral water she'd been sipping. A silent understanding passed between them. Starry gave a small, grateful nod. She walked over, took the bottle, and returned to her painting. "My painting is an impressionist piece," she announced, her voice ringing with newfound confidence. "It just needs one more thing to be complete." With a dramatic flourish, she unscrewed the cap and, using her thumb, sent a fine mist of water arcing across the canvas. The crowd gasped. Where the water droplets hit, the special pigments she had secretly mixed began to react. The chaotic splashes of blue and green bled into a shimmering, breathtaking pond. Splotches of pink and white bloomed into water lily. Dark, jagged lines softened into the delicate wings of a dragonfly hovering over the water's surface. The abstract mess transformed, in seconds, into a vibrant, living masterpiece, pulsating with light and emotion. The gymnasium was silent for a beat, then erupted into thunderous, astonished applause. The judges were on their feet, their faces alight with wonder. Chase allowed a rare, proud smile to touch his lips. Beside him, Grace's manicured hand was pressed to her mouth, her eyes wide with a dawning, complex emotion that was dangerously close to admiration. Starry had won, overwhelmingly. Owen stared, his jaw slack with disbelief, as Starry calmly walked over and held out her hand. Defeated and humiliated, he unclasped the lucky bracelet and slapped it into her palm. She closed her small fist around it, the metal cool against her skin, one key in each hand. The fight was far from over, but for the first time, victory felt possible.